Hi, and welcome back to the final tutorial on camera projection, or at least this set of camera projection. I do have some other tutorials as well, so what I've done is since the last tutorial is I've gone in and I've added in the ceiling, excuse me, which is actually just a copy of the floor and then moved into position and slightly rescaled, and I added in a card for the back, which you'll see I've kind of made a little bit larger than it perhaps needs to be, and also there's a bit of a gap, so let's just pull that in. Oops. So that's at least touching there. Okay, so I've kind of placed the card for that. So now we're sort of ready, like I said, to try this out as a projection and see if it works. So like we did at the beginning of tutorial 1, we're just going to project onto these cards, but hopefully now they're positioned in a similar way to the actual objects in the environment. So we don't need the grids anymore, so I'm going to highlight. Now I could just highlight all these, press D for delete. I could even disable them for a bit. I am going to disconnect them, and because I like to keep them just in case and just move them out of the way. And so what we're going to do is now, in order to create a camera projection instead, so we're not going to really need this as a backdrop anymore now, because we've used that to set up all our cards. So this is what we've got: a camera, our scene, a scanline renderer, which is like I compared to 2D, and our scene, which has all these cards that are positioned. So we're going to use now a project 3D node. Oops, it was already on there. There we go. And this project 3D will allow the camera to basically turn into a projector. So I'm going to disconnect this for now from the camera input, and I'm going to use this instead as a projector in here. And what I'm also going to do as well is, so you need an image that you actually want to project, and that is going to be this image here. And once I've done that, it basically just projects onto these cards. So you can see now that card's in position, so it's projecting onto there. The right wall comes into position, it projects onto there. Now you can see there's gaps. There's a couple of reasons why that's there. In fact, maybe it's easier to say as well, by the way, because this has become a projector now, there's no camera in the scene, so it's kind of defaulted to a different setup, which is obviously causing us a few issues there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this camera as well, Control C and Control, oh right, okay, sorry, Control C and Control V. And so I'm going to use, so it's exact copy of the camera position, and I'm going to connect that up there instead. So that way we will have two cameras in the scene in exactly the same place, so it'll look like one, but one is a projector and the other is our actual camera that we're going to animate. Let's jump back into 2D view now. So we'll still probably have some small gaps, but nowhere near as big as they were there. So we've got our camera going into our, which is becoming our projector, and we've got the background we want to project. So like I said, we start to project onto these cards, and there you go. So you can see the floor card is hopefully just catching the floor because that's where it's positioned. The right wall card is just catching that. The left wall card is just catching that, and so on. So what I'm going to do is highlight these nodes again, just move them even further out. So we don't, like I said, we probably won't need them anymore really. And I'm just going to connect all these cards up to the project 3D, and as they do that, they get the image projected onto them from this projector here. So like I said, now I could have fixed these issues, so I knew that I was going to have a few, but I thought it was worth to sort of leave some in because you do sometimes encounter these kind of problems, and only after, when you've finished the when you actually try to project it, and that's okay. We can have a look at fixing those. Luckily, because we've got most of our cards in place, it's not too big a deal. So it looks like, again, there's that's the floor that finishes there. Then we've got the wall, but they're not actually overlapping. So I mentioned that, you know, there's nothing wrong with having them overlap slightly, but what you don't want is to leave a gap, and so we've got gaps here, but that's okay. Given that they're all sort of generally correctly positioned, what I'm going to do is go to right wall. So I'm going to double click right wall because I'm happy with where the floor goes, and I'm just going to go to its scale, and I'm just going to adjust that scale up slightly. So it's the 2.1 bit. Let's just turn that up slightly so you can see as we go up, it's filling that space up. Okay, and I'm just going to, there you go. So I'll just rescale that to fill that gap in. And I'm going to do the same thing with left wall as well. Double click the left wall, and I'm going to just rescale it to fill that in. So you can do that. Oh, I was just checking. Yeah, we've got a little bit of gap there. I thought that was one as well, but it's not. And that looks like it's in the ceiling perhaps, really, rather than the wall. So I'm going to go to the ceiling there. Let's have a look at that card. So it'll be the longest property. It'll be that one, that 24. Let's change that to 25, and you can see it's kind of getting there. Let's just change it to like 27 or something. Nope, still needs to be a bit higher. Okay, I could have just moved along. There we go. Right, and so that's now filled in those gaps. Given that the cards were generally in the right position, just slightly scaling them up worked fine. But if they weren't and they were off by quite a lot, that probably wouldn't really fix the issue. So like I said, all I've really done is just rescale those things a bit. But like I said, you can see the projection now is going across, and this is what's actually happening in 3D space. And what we get from that is the this image that looks identical to the one we had before, but it's not. It's actually 3D now, and I'll show you why that matters or what you can do with it. So now we're going to animate within this space. Before we do that, one of the other things we can do as well, which will make things easier. So like I said, we've actually got two cameras. We've got a camera and a projector in the exact same spot. So we're going to double click this one here, our projector. Now if it makes things easy for you, again, you could go into the label on the node and call it a projector. Obviously it'll still say camera 1 projector, or you could even just change its name there where it says camera 1. So again, that helps you just identify that it's not even a camera now, it's a projector. But what you can also do is if you go into the camera tab, you can uncheck selectable, so you won't be able to select it in here no matter what you do. However, you'll still be able to see it. So rather than displaying it as a wireframe, we could just say off, so it's not even there anymore, so it won't get in the way now. So the only camera we can see in this scene now is that camera. So let's look at doing some animation. So we're only going to do some very simple animation here. Let's close all these boxes up first. Properties. Double click the camera, so we're just seeing that. So we're just going to use the translate. So the translate is your X, Y, and Z. So basically Y being up, X being left and right, and Z being Z depth. Okay, so moving down the corridor. One other thing we'll do actually as well, before we even get into that, let's jump back to 2D view. By default, Nuke is set for 35mm. You can see here this 2K Super display, which is 2048 pixels by 1556, and we don't want to work on that. I only want to work in HD in this case. Okay, I say we don't want to. It depends what you're after. But I only need a HD display output, and you can see as well that there's areas where the image just wasn't sort of taking up that space. I think the image itself is HD. In fact, if I double click this. No, it's not. It is a lot larger format. My mistake. But like I said, I don't want to be outputting in this this size. And also, we've got a couple of issues there, like I said, with the bars. Now, that's not too big a deal. You just move the camera in slightly, and you'll lose the bars. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to close all these down, and on here I'm going to press S, which will bring up the project settings. And you can see there's the size that it's outputting at. So that's what the camera is outputting for. And I'm going to change that to HD. So if I change that to HD, you can see all of a sudden it crops the top and the bottom. So the other image was a lot more square, and now it's got wider, and that's worked out quite nicely because it's meant that I've got rid of those two bars at the top and the bottom without having to move that camera. Okay, so now I'm going to, like I said, just animate. So double click our camera, and we're just going to change these properties. So these little squiggly lines that you see next to any property is your animate button. So if you right click that, oh no, you can left click it as well. Okay, left click that if you like, and just say set key. We're on our first frame, by the way, so bear in mind where you are, because that will kind of be your, it'll add a keyframe at that point, so that's your starting point. So I'll go set key, so it's added a keyframe, that's why it turns blue. So when it's this dark blue, it's telling you that there's a keyframe there. So there's a keyframe at frame 1. So now I'm going to jump to, I don't know, let's see how far, let's see where we get to in about, say, 50 frames. A couple of seconds. Oh no, let's go for the full 100. I don't think it'll take too long to animate. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to now just move this camera. So I'm going to move it into the scene, and you'll see as I do that, if we jump in, you can see it's actually moving into that environment. I'm going to pull it slightly off to the left, and I'm just going to push it down here, and it's getting too close to the wall actually. So maybe I might just rotate it as well. So if we go back to frame 1, let's animate set key for rotate as well. So at this point it's positioned here, but by the time it gets to frame 100, I want the camera to slightly rotate it to the left as well. Oops, too much. You can see there's nothing there, so maybe not that much. Okay, just a little bit. In fact, we could also just push this out a bit too. There we go, so it gets away from the wall. The thing is, you get too close to the wall or anything else, and you can start to get sort of pixelation issues or things like that. Whereas in a real video, you would just be moving it. Just having a look, we've got a little bit of a gap there, so I don't know if I have to just, although I've decided to rotate it. If I'm going to just have to rotate that back. Okay, so let's just see if that works. Let's jump to, there we go, make that a little bit bigger, and let's just quickly play that through and see what happens. So what you'll find will happen first anyways, it's caching. So that means it's kind of creating these frames and then saving them in order to be able to play back a lot quicker the second time around. So first time it never really manages to play, I find Nuke never really manages to play in real time in most cases. Obviously it is dependent on your machine setup. But it shouldn't take too long, and then once it's done that, we can at least watch it back in real time. And I think it's always worth watching things back in real time because you get a sense of the actual speed, which is really important. So sometimes you can look at something and say, yep, the animation's correct, but how fast or slow is it? That has a big impact on the way things look. By the way, notice like you've got these objects that are sticking out of the wall, but we didn't put any cards in just for those bits or anything like that. So, just bear that in mind, that that is really just on a flat card. And yeah, I find it still can work quite well. But obviously, like I said, get too close and it starts to give up the fact that it's, or give away the fact that it's a still image. But let's see how that works out. Here we go. So now it's playing in real time. There we go. And what should happen is now it looks like we're actually moving down the corridor rather than just zooming into a picture. And especially true here as we move past that wall. I think that works quite well. Yeah, you can see we're sort of getting around that, and look, if you look at the top or the bottom here, we're actually sort of moving along that floor, and you can see that ceiling as well. Same thing happening there. So that's because in a sense these are all texture maps, and where we actually are moving through in 3D space. So if you look at what that camera is doing, or what our virtual camera is doing, here we go, it is actually moving down that scene. Okay. And that's one example of camera projection, but I've got a few others as well, and you can do a lot more with it, but give that a try. You can take any still image you've got yourself, and it'd be worth giving that a shot. Okay.